In the early 2000s, one Japanese company built what was essentially a fortress, a single factory that made every part of its televisions in-house, sealed off so tightly that even its own suppliers' employees needed special badges just to walk through certain doors. It was built to protect a technological lead so valuable that competitors would kill for a peek inside. 15 years later, that same company was owned by a Taiwanese manufacturer. This is the story of Sharp and how the walls it built to keep its secrets in ended up walling the company into a corner it couldn't get out of.
In 2004, Sharp switched on a new factory in the city of Kameyama in Mie Prefecture. The plant went online on January 8th on the back of roughly 100 billion yen in investment. And what made it unusual wasn't just its size. It was that Sharp built it to handle everything, from manufacturing the raw LCD panel to assembling the finished television under one roof. Most rivals bought panels or components from outside suppliers. Sharp made every piece itself, and it kept expanding. Monthly panel capacity at the plant grew roughly fourfold in its first years, climbing from about 15,000 sheets of glass to around 60,000. The televisions that came out of that factory were sold under Sharp's Aquas brand, launched a few years earlier, and marketed, in Sharp's own words, as the home television of the 21st century, and rebadged again with the Kameyama Model name. For a while, that name meant something extraordinary. By some measures, Sharp held something like 70% of the entire global LCD television market in the early 2000s. And its group-wide sales climbed from around 2.26 trillion yen the fiscal year before Kameyama started to a record 3.42 trillion yen 4 years later. All of it on a simple promise that owning every single step of production made for a better, more reliable product than anyone else could build. Sharp's founder, Hayakawa Tokuji, had built the company nearly a century earlier on mechanical pencils and later on some of Japan's first domestically produced radios and televisions, on a philosophy of moving into new technology faster than anyone else. Kameyama, with roughly 1,000 workers on site at launch, looked like the modern-day expression of that same instinct, just scaled up to an entirely different order of magnitude.
But Sharp wasn't just building televisions at Kameyama, it was guarding a secret. To keep its LCD manufacturing know-how from leaking to competitors, the company effectively sealed parts of the factory into what's often described as a black box. Even employees of its own component suppliers had to wear special identification badges and were physically barred from entering certain areas of the plant beyond their assigned zone. There's a real irony buried in that decision. Sharp's own LCD lineage had started decades earlier by doing the opposite. Back in 1971, the company licensed core display patents from the American firm RCA and built a small internal team known as S734 that turned that borrowed foreign technology into Sharp's own liquid crystal calculator display in under a year. The company that once absorbed outside knowledge at speed had by the 2000s become a company obsessed with keeping all outside knowledge from getting anywhere near what it had built. This wasn't paranoia for its own sake. Sharp's entire competitive advantage rested on manufacturing knowledge that, if it got out, other companies could copy. Locking it down was the whole point. By the mid-2000s, industry reporters noted that even Sharp's own domestic component suppliers had to check in through that badge system every single time they entered, a level of internal compartmentalization that stood out even among Japan's notoriously secretive electronics makers. For a while, it worked exactly as intended. Nobody else could build a factory quite like this one.
Japanese business journalism that covered Sharp's rise in detail described exactly what this strategy was meant to achieve and exactly where it went wrong. Sharp's approach was later analyzed as fundamentally supplier-focused rather than consumer-focused, an assumption that a beautiful large-screen television built entirely in-house to the company's own exacting standard would simply speak for itself in the market. That's a very different starting point from asking what a customer actually wants to pay for. By the second half of the 2000s, Japanese industry analysts identified the core problem. LCD panels had become commoditized. Rival manufacturers, many of them outside Japan,
could now produce panels of equal or better quality without needing Sharp's in-house vertically integrated approach at all. The numbers behind that commoditization are stark. Industry pricing data shows a standard 32-inch LCD panel selling for roughly $865 in 2004, the year Kameyama opened. By 2011, that same size of panel was going for around $149, a drop of more than 80%. Korean manufacturers, chiefly Samsung and LG, were pouring billions into their own massive LCD lines during exactly this period, without carrying anything like Sharp's fully in-house cost structure and undercutting Sharp on price with each passing product cycle. The fortress that once protected Sharp's advantage was now just an enormous, expensive factory with nothing left to protect.
Instead of stepping back, Sharp doubled down. In 2007, the company committed to building an even larger facility in Sakai, outside Osaka, a next-generation LCD plant with a total investment exceeding 500 billion yen, roughly $3.4 billion at the time, designed to produce the equivalent of some 13 million 32-inch panels a year. It was the same playbook as Kameyama, just built bigger, at exactly the moment the playbook itself was starting to fail. To fund construction, Sharp took on substantial new debt exactly as panel prices were beginning their steepest fall, a timing problem that would compound every year afterward. Within a few years, the Sakai plant was reportedly running at well under half of that planned capacity. Around the same time, Sharp converted part of its original Kameyama plant into a dedicated supplier for Apple's small and mid-sized displays. That contract turned out to be a bad one from the start. When the factory ran below capacity, it was Sharp, not Apple, that absorbed the losses. Two enormous bets, made back-to-back, both assuming the old formula of scale and in-house control would keep working. It didn't.
By the mid-2010s, Sharp was in serious financial trouble, and it had been building for years. In 2009, the company posted its first net loss since going public back in 1956. By 2012, that loss had ballooned to more than $5 billion in a single year, with sales down roughly $10 billion from the 2008 peak. Foxconn had already tested the waters once before. Back in 2012, it bought roughly a 9.9% stake in Sharp for about $854 million, a foothold rather than a takeover. 4 years later, in 2016, Foxconn came back for the rest. Taiwan's Foxconn, the world's largest electronics contract manufacturer, agreed to acquire the company for roughly $3.8 billion, a deal that was actually cut down from Foxconn's original offer by nearly $900 million after undisclosed financial liabilities came to light during due diligence. A company that had spent over a decade building walls to keep its technology to itself was now itself being acquired. Later that same year, Sharp's LCD subsidiary, SDP, which ran the Sakai plant, was restructured. A majority stake went to a holding company controlled by Foxconn's founder, Terry Gou, moving SDP off Sharp's own balance sheet entirely.
Here's where the story gets stranger. Terry Gou's holding company didn't keep that SDP stake. It later sold it on to a fund based in Samoa. Then, in 2022, Sharp itself bought that stake back from the Samoan fund in a share swap deal worth roughly 40 billion yen, bringing SDP back under full Sharp ownership. Industry observers at the time struggled to see the strategic logic in reabsorbing a subsidiary that had just changed hands twice and was still losing money, but Sharp went ahead regardless. In plain terms, Sharp built the plant, lost control of it in the Foxconn restructuring, watched it get sold again to an offshore fund, and then paid to bring it back home. And the financial results after that buyback weren't kind. For the fiscal year ending December 2022, SDP alone posted a net loss of roughly 36 billion yen.
And then, in May 2024, Sharp announced the end of the road for the strategy that started at Kameyama 2 decades earlier. It would stop producing large LCD panels for televisions at the Sakai plant by the end of September that year. By then,
the company that had once commanded something like 70% of the global LCD television market, was down to roughly 6 or 7%, in 5th place worldwide, well behind a Korean rival, Samsung, which held the lead at around 19%. The factory built to out-manufacture the world, the technology walled off behind badges in restricted zones, the fortress rebuilt at Sakai for even more money, all of it wound down, not because a rival stole the secret, but because the secret stopped being worth protecting. The badges, the restricted zones, and the 2 custom-built factories that had once made Sharp's approach unique now had no strategic value left to protect at all.
Sharp's black box strategy worked exactly as designed for a decade. It protected a manufacturing advantage that no competitor could easily copy. What it didn't protect against was the moment that advantage stopped mattering at all, when the rest of the industry caught up on price and quality without needing to break in. Building higher walls doesn't help once the thing you're protecting isn't valuable anymore. Sharp spent 20 years finding that out the hard way, first at Kameyama, then at an even larger and more expensive scale at Sakai. It's a strange bookend for a company whose founder built his name on getting new technology out into the world faster than anyone else, only for his successors, decades later, to build their entire strategy around keeping technology locked in. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.